Britain's universities stand on the precipice, I think on the precipice or at the precipice of an unprecedented crisis. The sector is under siege on multiple fronts: financially, physically, academically, and morally. Redundancies are sweeping through institutions at a rate that suggests not mere pruning, but outright culling. Cardiff, Dundee, Edinburgh, Kent, Queen's Belfast, Sheffield, the list of institutions shedding jobs grows daily. Some estimates suggest that as many as 10,000 jobs will be lost this academic year alone. This isn't a mere adjustment, it's an existential threat to the future of these institutions. The financial underpinnings of higher education have been unravelling for years. Tuition fees in England have been frozen at £9,250 since 2017, with inflation steadily eroding their real value. What was once a lifeline for institutions has become an iron collar. Meanwhile, visa restrictions have drastically reduced international student numbers, exacerbating the crisis by cutting off the essential cross-subsidisation that keeps universities afloat. The effects are visible: staff layoffs, the closure of departments, and a growing sense of institutional panic. Adding insult to injury, the financial mismanagement of certain institutions has triggered a predatory response from the elite Russell Group universities, which have aggressively expanded recruitment, siphoning students away from smaller institutions. As a result, many mid-tier universities find themselves trapped in a desperate numbers game, cutting costs by centralising services, eliminating non-profitable courses, and thinning out the very departments that generate income. The entire business model is self-cannibalising. If anything exemplifies the degradation of UK higher education, it's a sustained attack on the humanities. Ancient history, modern languages, music, theology, my subject. Once the bedrock of intellectual life, once the test of whether people have actually got it, are now the first in line for the chopping block because they aren't useful. This utilitarian quest. Humanities departments have become casualties of a sector-wide pivot towards vocational and STEM subjects, an approach driven by a misguided perception that arts and culture lack economic value. This isn't just an academic crisis, it's an act of cultural vandalism, an act that misunderstands what a university is there for. The university is there to train the mind. If you want to train for a job, go and get an apprenticeship. The consequences of this stupidity are dire. The closure of history departments means the loss of vital local historical research. And it means the loss of that training, that analytical training, where people can immediately read a passage, read a book, and draw a conclusion, even if it's not the right conclusion, but at least they can see through the nonsense. So little is that groundwork is so reduced now that you end up with a sort of with a generation of people who believe what they're told. I greatly value the education I had in Oxford and elsewhere in theology because it sharpened my critical skills. I can read a book in an hour or so if I have to. I can draw conclusions quickly. They may not always be the right conclusions, but they are sound and supported. And when I look through the comment section of YouTube, I'm sometimes horrified with people simply repeating what they've been told rather than looking critically at what they've read. And it's that critical acumen which isn't being fed because the universities are increasingly being told that they should be training grounds for making money. In my day, people who studied theology went on to careers in Parliament, in business, in banking, and so on. Studying theology wasn't necessarily a mark of a career trajectory into the church. It was often into the broader arts or into anything that required analysis and mastering texts, acting, of course. And even the sciences will suffer without the critical thinking fostered by a robust humanities presence. To dismiss these disciplines, the sort of discipline that I learnt, that I was taught, as low value, is to misunderstand the very foundation of a civilized society. The crisis in academia extends beyond finances and course closures. It's about the crisis of identity. Universities are expected to function as businesses, but they operate under price caps. They're urged to be global research leaders while facing dwindling research funding. They must treat students as paying customers while simultaneously ensuring their employability, resilience, and academic growth. These contradictions have created an incoherent and fragmented system that pleases no one and achieves nothing. Moreover, universities have become the laboratories for every failed public policy experiment imaginable. The introduction of market forces into higher education, initiated by Tony Blair's 50% participation target and exacerbated by George Osborne's removal of the cap on student numbers, has led to catastrophic distortions. Larger universities hoard students, smaller universities struggle, and the entire sector lurches from one financial crisis to another. I know of many students who've been offered places, and then the visa doesn't come through. What does a university do? Well, that place, which has been given to one person, cannot go to another. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of this decline is the sheer inertia of policymakers, and the previous Conservative government oscillated between hostility and neglect, while the current Labour administration appears indifferent. The abandonment of Labour's tuition fee pledge signals a retreat from meaningful intervention. Universities aren't simply expected to muddle through, despite the mounting evidence that they cannot. They're expected to be obedient. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, claims that the recent tuition fee increase of £285 will provide relief. It won't provide a plaster. It's dwarfed by rising national insurance costs and a forecast £3.4 billion drop in sector-wide income by 2025 to 2026. This isn't a solution. £285 is not a solution. It's an acknowledgement that there is a hemorrhaging wound and that the government doesn't want to do anything about it. The UK's university system is unsustainable in its current form. What is needed is not another short-term bailout, but a complete structural overhaul. The government needs to reinstate a cap on student numbers to prevent large institutions from monopolising recruitment. Humanities departments must be protected from being seen as expendable, and above all, we need a long-term funding model that doesn't hinge on the wallets of international students or the arbitrary fluctuations of political priorities. The Robbins Report of 1963 transformed higher education by ensuring access and maintaining high academic standards. Today, the UK needs a new Robbins moment, a comprehensive review of what universities are for, how they should be funded, and how they should be structured to serve the country's long-term needs. I think we need not only an analysis of what is there, but we need a projected plan for how to deal with the universities as they move forward. We need to change the model. The model for the last 100 years at least has been the factory. We put a student in at one end and they come out at the other, and they are told what to do. I think we need to change the model. We need to have universities that are student-led rather than teacher-led. We need to have courses which can be selected. With AI and with significantly more flexible teaching options, we should have a burst of different courses that can be offered. Instead, we've got a dearth of courses. If we continue down the present road, we risk creating a system where only the wealthy and the privileged can afford to study the very subjects that define British cultural and intellectual heritage. Universities are more than degree factories. They're the custodians of knowledge, the engines of innovation, and the lifeblood of cultural and scientific progress. Letting them crumble, both physically and morally and academically, is not just an educational disaster, it's a national disaster.